She ruled with an iron will, destroyed planets without shedding a tear, until she touched one. A single human tear. And in that moment, everything she believed shattered. Xael'ara sat in silence, her violet eyes fixed on the human before her. The grand chamber of judgments loomed with cold elegance, lined with angular Threxian architecture, metal as black as void stone, glowing veins of blue plasma etched into the walls like living circuit lines. Every breath taken here was monitored, every life judged, calculated, and deemed worthy or discarded. There were no delays in Threxian justice. Efficiency was perfection. Emotion was a flaw. That was the way of her people. And yet, something unexpected disrupted the symmetry of the moment. The human stood there, bound by grav bonds, his frame weary, battered, and underfed. He was, by every metric of the Dominion, inconsequential. An inferior life form. But Xael'ara studied him carefully. His eyes didn't lower in fear. His voice didn't tremble when he spoke. Instead, he told a story. Not to plead. Not to manipulate. Simply to remember. I was there when the hospital collapsed, he said. His voice rough yet resonant. Dust everywhere. Screaming. I thought we lost everyone. But then I heard a baby crying somewhere under the rubble. Me and a crew of nurses clawed through concrete for 8 hours. Found her. Wrapped in nothing but a nurse's coat. She made it. We gave her the name Hope. The translator implanted in Xael'ara's neural cortex flawlessly converted the Terran language. But the translator could not measure the resonance of the voice behind the words, the music in the cadence, the fragile urgency. And just as impossibly, something new bloomed in her chest. Something cold at first. Then warm. Then sharp. Pain. No strategy. No logic, he continued. We just dug with our hands. Because we had to. Because life mattered. Even in the middle of death. And that's when it happened. Subtle. Gentle. The smallest twitch in his face. The glistening of water upon his cheek. A single tear. She had interrogated battle-hardened generals from across galaxies. Crushed rebellions with the silent gesture of her fingers. Witnessed the obliteration of entire moons at her command. And yet this, a tear, unraveled her in a way no weapon or fleet ever had. The room's silence pressed against her ears as if the galaxy itself held its breath. Her advisors shifted uncomfortably behind her throne. A display of emotional weakness, even from a low-species prisoner, was an offense punishable by immediate termination. But Xael'ara didn't speak. She stood. Each movement echoed within the vast chamber. Her steps were regal but cautious, like a predator stalking something unfamiliar. Not prey but mystery. She descended from the throne with electric grace, her thick robes trailing behind her like smoke in slow motion. The human didn't flinch as she approached. His eyes met hers unafraid. Alive. She stopped in front of him. The tear still shimmered on his cheek. Before logic could reassert itself, before centuries of genetic engineering and imperial protocol could stop her, she reached out. Gently. Slowly. Her clawed finger, usually a symbol of command and execution, hovered for a moment over his skin. She touched the tear. It clung to her fingertip, a microscopic drop of water in saline, fragile and insignificant. And yet her sensors screamed with anomalies, heart rate spikes, cerebral patterns fluctuating, strange molecules flooding her bloodstream. Oxytocin, dopamine, things she had no names for anymore. Things her species had forgotten. For a full 3 seconds she remained still. Then her hand fell. My queen, one of the adjutants whispered through their neural link. Shall we dispose of the creature? She didn't answer. Not immediately. Her voice came out softer than it ever had before, and to her own shock uncertain. No. The word was a fracture in tradition. A tremor in the foundations of the Dominion. He is to be kept alive, she said louder, turning toward her court. Under protective custody. His knowledge and perspective may be of value. Gasps echoed through those assembled. A response more human than Threxian. Emotions forbidden rose like ghosts among them. Curiosity, fear, awe. Xael'ara turned back to Jordan. He was watching her, not with gratitude or hope, but with compassion. Why did you cry? She asked, her voice trimmed with cautious curiosity. Because I remembered something worth crying for, he said. And maybe so did you. She didn't answer. He was returned to his cell, but it was no longer a cell in purpose. He was not interrogated. Instead, he was invited to speak, to share. Not with all, not yet, but with her. Night after night, Xael'ara visited, sometimes in person, sometimes as a projection. She listened to stories of human resilience, of art, of friendships born in trenches, of songs sung beneath stars the Threx had long since conquered. She asked questions about colors humans saw when in love, about laughter, about funerals, and sometimes in the quiet of those sessions, she would touch her fingertips to her cheek, where once she'd felt that tear, and imagine something wet and warm lingering there. Her advisors were torn. Whispers spread through the empire, some declaring her compromised, others calling it evolution. But Xael'ara knew one thing. In that singular droplet of emotion, she saw something her species had cast away in pursuit of domination, a forgotten strength. One not forged in gene labs or sharpened through training, but something older, wilder, truer. They had designed themselves to feel nothing, but now, she felt everything. And for the first time in 1,000 years, the stars above the Dominion no longer felt conquered. They felt infinite. The moment her clawed fingers brushed against the human's tear, a shock surged through her. It was not a physical jolt, but a deeper ancient stirring that reverberated through the very core of her being. Memories that were not her own, memories belonging to Jordan, flooded her mind all at once. In a cascade of vivid recollection, she beheld images of a gentle mother's smile, the tender glow of joy on a newborn's face cradled by its loving caregiver, and the soft luminescence of the stars over Australia on a memorable 17th birthday. Intermixed with these tender moments was an agonizing vision, the scene of a dying soldier in despair, grasping a hand with desperate hope as someone whispered, "You're not alone." The rush of these unbidden emotions hit her like solar storms, overwhelming every instinct in centuries of carefully honed detachment. For eons, Xael'ara had ruled with an iron will, her essence as cold and formidable as the void between stars. Victorious in countless galactic conquests and unchallenged in her dominion over vast empires, she had never known vulnerability. The centuries had taught her the language of power and fear, not of empathy or fragile human sorrow. Yet now, as she stood on the precipice of a sensation entirely foreign, the ancient queen found herself battling the onslaught of raw emotion. Every smile, every tear, every heartbeat of Jordan resonated within her like a sonorous echo. It was as if an ancient door had swung open inside her, revealing a chamber of feelings long suppressed and nearly forgotten. In that timeless moment, she staggered from her throne that had borne witness to countless triumphs and tragedies, a throne now rendered almost insignificant by the undeniable pulse of life coursing through her. Gasping, with breath tempered by both the heat of fire and the chill of frost, she struggled to maintain control. The guards, who would have otherwise acted without hesitation to defend the sanctity of their monarch, moved to encircle her in a protective formation. Their instincts, honed by millennia of loyalty and duty, commanded them to intervene. Yet, as her trembling hand ascended with a regal yet broken authority, she uttered in her native tongue a command that brooked no question. "Leave us." And, as if bewitched by the enigmatic cadence of her voice, the assembled figures fell back silently, leaving a cavernous void in the once imposing hall. Standing before her now was Jordan, the unwitting catalyst for this profound metamorphosis. His eyes met hers with quiet intensity as the revelation of change shimmered between them like a promise of both danger and liberation. "You feel it now, don't you?" he whispered, his voice carrying the tender weight of shared humanity. In that brief whispered exchange, the gulf of millennia between conqueror and subject seemed to narrow, bridging the chasm with the currency of feeling, a vulnerability neither had ever allowed to intrude upon their carefully constructed existences. Xael'ara could not find words to answer him. All language evaporated in the wake of the tumult within her mind, a maelstrom of emotions that rendered her speechless. Instead, she felt the ancient armor of her heart begin to crack, fissures coursing with the warm light of over 1,000 lifetimes. What had once been an existence of solitary conquest now resonated with the symphony of life's most intricate melodies. Memories of battles fought and worlds subdued meshed with the softness of human experience, and the dichotomy was too profound to contain. In that moment, the queen, renowned for her ruthless dominion, surrendered to the strange, unanticipated beauty of empathy. As she stood in the silent aftermath, the regal heavy air of her throne room gave way to a palpable energy, as if the very fabric of time and space shuddered at her revelation. The guardians, now dispersed, cast furtive glances at one another, their eyes betraying confusion and awe at witnessing the unraveling of the formidable monarch. To them, Xael'ara had always been a being of unyielding purpose, a sovereign whose glance alone could cause trembling. But now, beneath the sorrow and elation intermingled in her expression, they saw a hint of something more profound, the dawning of compassion in a soul long thought irredeemable. The memories that had invaded her consciousness were not merely Jordan's recollections. They were the distilled essence of humanity itself, a kaleidoscope of joy, sorrow, love, and grief. And as she endured this relentless inward cascade, it became startlingly clear that every tear, every fleeting moment of beauty or despair, was irrevocably intertwined with the fate of countless beings scattered across the cosmos. In that startling epiphany, she discerned the painful truth that her victories had come at a cost unnumbered in the hearts of those she had vanquished. The once silent void of her heart now pulsated with empathy for the multitude of lives that had been altered by her hands. For the first time in what felt like thousands of years, Xael'ara experienced what it truly meant to feel. It was a sensation both exquisite and excruciating, a delicate mingling of love and grief that threatened to undo the carefully constructed barriers of her ancient soul. As she inhaled deeply, every breath became a testament to her transformation. The cold calculus of power was no longer enough. In that singular convergence of mortal memory and immortal presence, she recognized that even a queen of galaxies could be humbled by the fragile, yet unyielding, tenderness of human experience. Her defiant silence and the vulnerability that now radiated from her made Jordan's whispered query resonate in the echo of eternity. Without a spoken reply, her eyes, brimming with both unshed tears and newfound understanding, acknowledged the metamorphosis that had taken root. In that charged, suspended moment, a nexus of emotion and cosmic might, the ancient battlefield of her heart was irrevocably transformed. The empire she had once ruled with calculated precision now seemed a mere shadow compared to the luminous spectrum of life that now shone within her. And as the colors of empathy danced in the depths of her gaze, she knew there was no turning back from the path that lay ahead, a path of redemption, fraught with the potential for both healing and unforeseen sacrifice. Thus began the uncharted journey of Xael'ara, a journey no longer defined solely by conquest, but by the remarkable, inexorable pulse of empathy that connected her to every beating heart in the cosmos. For days, Xael'ara said nothing to her council. She locked herself away, the heavy doors of her private sanctum sealing out the world. The once imposing corridors of the royal Nebula Palace, designed to inspire awe and fear, now felt suffocating. Inside, the silence was absolute, broken only by the faint hum of the palace's life support systems and the relentless, unyielding pulse of her own thoughts. She replayed Jordan's memories again and again, each recollection a stark contrast to the cold, calculated existence she had known for millennia. The warmth of a mother's embrace, the innocent laughter of a child, the quiet devastation of a soldier's final moments, all of it replayed in an endless loop, each frame etching itself deeper into her consciousness. She accessed her military logs, the cold, clinical records of her conquests, the planetary burnings, the labor colonies, the millions of families torn apart by her iron will. All of it was laid bare before her. Once, these had been symbols of her power, her dominion over the cosmos. But now, with these human emotions flooding her system, she saw it not as victories, but as horror. The data no longer spoke of strategic triumphs or the efficient subjugation of worlds. Instead, it whispered of screams, of mothers separated from their children, of lives extinguished without a second thought. The numbers on the screen became faces, and the faces became stories. Stories of pain, of loss, of despair. In that moment, the weight of her actions pressed down on her like a physical force, and for the first time in her long existence, she felt the crushing burden of regret. The memories of Jordan's life, interwoven with the cold facts of her own history, created a dichotomy that threatened to tear her apart. She had always believed herself to be above such things, above emotion, above mercy, above the fragility of life. But now, as she stared at the records of worlds reduced to ash, she could no longer deny the truth. The fire that had once burned within her as a symbol of her power now felt like an inferno consuming her from the inside. She had conquered galaxies, but in doing so, she had destroyed the very essence of what made life worth living. The more she delved into her past, the more she realized that her reign had been built on the ashes of countless dreams, the silence of broken hearts. Unable to remain confined any longer, she began walking the corridors of the Royal Nebula Palace. Silent, watching. Her footsteps echoed in the vast empty halls, a stark contrast to the days when her presence had been met with hushed reverence and fear. Now the fear remained, but beneath it, she could sense something else, something she had never noticed before. She passed guards standing at attention, their eyes downcast, and she saw the sorrow beneath the fear in their eyes. It was a sorrow born of weariness, of obedience to a will that had never considered their own lives, their own dreams. They were not just extensions of her power, they were individuals, and in that realization, she felt a pang of something she could not yet name. She moved through the palace, her presence both commanding and strangely vulnerable. The servants who once scurried out of her way now hesitated, their eyes meeting hers for fleeting moments before they quickly averted their gazes. In those brief exchanges she saw the same sorrow, the same unspoken weariness. They lived in a world defined by her will, but their lives were not their own. They existed in the shadow of her power, and now for the first time she saw the cost of that shadow. Driven by an insatiable curiosity and a need to understand the foreign emotions coursing through her, she made her way to the chamber where Jordan was held. The guards at the entrance recognized her now, their movements stiff as they parted to let her pass. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the tension of her presence. Jordan sat on a simple cot, his back against the wall, his eyes closed as if in quiet contemplation. He opened them as she entered, his expression calm, almost expectant. There was no fear in his gaze, no plea for mercy. Instead, there was a quiet understanding, as if he had known she would come. "Why do your kind cry?" she asked him. Her voice was low, almost a whisper, a stark contrast to the commanding tone she was used to. There was a vulnerability in the question, a hint of the turmoil raging within her. Jordan shrugged weakly, his movements slow as if the weight of the world rested on his shoulders. "Because we care," he said simply. "Because even in pain, we hope something better can rise from it." His words were quiet, but they carried a weight that resonated deeply within her. Crying is a way of releasing the pain, but it's also a way of clinging to the belief that things can change. That even in the darkest moments, there's a chance for something brighter. "Hope," she echoed. The word felt alien on her tongue, a concept she had never considered before. In her world, there had been only power, only control. The idea of hope, of believing in something greater than herself, something that could not be commanded or conquered, was both foreign and intoxicating. It was a fragile thing, this hope, and yet it had the power to move mountains, to inspire acts of courage and love. She had always believed that strength came from dominance, from the ability to bend others to her will. But now she wondered if strength could also come from something as simple, yet as profound as hope. For the first time in her long existence, she felt the stirrings of a desire to understand, to connect. The human before her was not just a subject, not just a curiosity. He was a living, breathing embodiment of the emotions she was now experiencing. And in that moment she realized that she had so much to learn, so much to atone for. The path ahead was unclear, fraught with challenges she could not yet imagine. But for the first time in thousands of years, Xael'ara felt a spark of something new, a spark of hope. It was small, fragile, but it was there, burning brightly within her, a beacon in the darkness of her past. As she stood before Jordan, the weight of her decisions pressing down on her, she knew that she could no longer remain the same. The queen who had once ruled with an iron fist was gone, replaced by a being still learning the language of empathy, of compassion, of hope. And though the road ahead would be difficult, she was determined to walk it, to forge a new path, not just for herself, but for the countless lives she had affected. In that moment she made a silent vow, to use the power she had wielded for destruction, to now wield it for healing, to turn the tide of her legacy, to give hope to those who had known only fear. "Hope," she said again, this time with a newfound sense of purpose. And as she turned to leave the chamber, She felt the first glimmer of a future she had never dared to imagine. The next time Xael'ara summoned her council, the atmosphere in the grand hall was thick with anticipation. The counselors, clad in their finest robes of office, gathered around the dais where her obsidian throne loomed like a monolith of power. The guards stood rigidly at attention, their eyes scanning the room for any sign of dissent. For days, rumors had swirled through the palace, whispers of the queen's changed demeanor, of the human she had been seen visiting, of the strange, uncharacteristic silence that had fallen over her. But no one had dared to question her directly. Now, as she entered the chamber, her presence was both familiar and foreign. The counselors fell silent, their eyes fixed on her as she ascended the steps to the dais. There was a stillness about her, a quiet strength that seemed to emanate from within, but it was not the strength of wrath or dominion. It was something else, something they could not quite place. She stood before them, her gaze sweeping across the assemblage. The High General, a figure as ancient as she was, sat at the head of the council, his eyes narrowing as he took in her expression. The other counselors shifted uncomfortably, sensing the tension in the air. For a moment no one spoke. The only sound was the soft hum of the palace's energy systems, a constant reminder of the power that flowed through every corner of the royal nebula palace. Then, in a voice that was calm but carried the weight of millennia, Xael'ara spoke. "We end the war." The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding. At first, there was a stunned silence, as if the counselors had not fully comprehended what she had said. Then, like a wave crashing against the shore, the room erupted into shocked murmurs. The High General, his scales rippling with displeasure, rose from his seat, his eyes blazing with indignation. "This is madness," he hissed, his voice cutting through the chaos. "The humans are weak. Their tears cannot feed our empire. What of our strength? What of our dominance? We have fought for cycles, bled for cycles, and now you speak of ending it? For what? A few fleeting emotions? The tears of a single human?" His words were laced with contempt, a reflection of the belief that had driven their empire for centuries. That power was everything, that weakness was to be crushed, and that empathy was a sign of frailty. The other counselors began to murmur in agreement, their voices rising in a chorus of disbelief and protest. One of the military strategists leaned forward, his claws tapping impatiently on the arm of his chair. "My queen," he said, his voice smooth but firm. "The humans are a threat. They resist us at every turn. Their planets are rich with resources. Their technology, though primitive, could be ours. Why surrender this now? What have you gained from this human that could possibly outweigh the future of our people?" Xael'ara did not flinch. She stood tall, her eyes now glowing not with wrath, but with a clarity that seemed to pierce through the very souls of those who dared to challenge her. The glow was not the fiery rage of old, but something softer, something that hinted at a depth of understanding they had never seen in her before. For a moment the room fell silent again, as if the weight of her presence demanded it. She took a step forward, her movements deliberate, and the counselors instinctively leaned back, as if physically recoiling from the intensity of her gaze. "Then perhaps our empire has been fed on the wrong things," she said, her voice low but carrying an undeniable authority. The words hung in the air, a challenge to everything they believed. The High General hissed again, his frustration evident, but before he could speak, Xael'ara raised a hand. The gesture was simple, but it silenced the room once more. There was a power in her stillness, a power that came not from intimidation, but from an unshakable resolve. Without waiting for a response, she turned and walked toward her obsidian throne. The counselors watched in confusion, unsure of her intent. The throne, a symbol of her dominion for thousands of years, loomed before her, dark, imposing and unyielding. It had been crafted from the heart of a dying star, its surface etched with ancient runes that spoke of power, of conquest, of the unbreakable will of the Queen of the Xael. For generations it had been the center of her rule, the physical embodiment of her authority. To sit upon it was to command the cosmos. But now as she reached it she did not sit. Instead, she placed her clawed hand on its base, her fingers curling around the cold, smooth surface. The counselors gasped as they realized what she intended. The High General's eyes widened, and he took a step forward, his voice rising in protest. "No, my queen. That is the throne of our people, the symbol of our strength. But it was too late. With a mere thought, she activated the incineration protocol, a failsafe built into the throne itself, designed to prevent rebels from ever claiming it. The air around the base of the throne began to crackle with energy, and then in an instant flames erupted. Not ordinary flames, but a searing otherworldly fire that consumed the dark stone with a hunger that seemed almost alive. The throne screamed in ancient code, a language long forgotten by most, but one that Xael'ara understood all too well. It was a cry of agony, a protest against the destruction of something that had stood for so long as the pinnacle of power. The flames engulfed the royal seat, and in moments, the once majestic throne was reduced to molten shards, crumbling to the ground like dust. The symbol of terror, domination, and absolute power was gone, leaving only smoke and embers in its wake. The counselors stared in shock, their mouths agape, their minds reeling from the implications of what they had just witnessed. The High General stumbled back, his face a mask of disbelief. "What have you done?" he whispered, his voice trembling with a mixture of fear and rage. Xael'ara turned to face the council, her eyes still glowing with that same quiet clarity. The flames at her feet hissed and died, leaving behind only the scent of scorched stone. She looked at them one by one, her gaze lingering on each of their faces. They saw not the queen they had known, the one who ruled with an iron fist, who crushed dissent without mercy, but someone new, someone who carried the weight of 1,000 regrets, yet stood with the determination of one who had finally found a path worth walking. "I have ruled without compassion for 1,000 cycles," she said, her voice steady, unwavering. "I have built my empire on fear, on the ashes of worlds, on the tears of the defeated. I have believed that power was everything, that strength came only from dominance. But I was wrong." She took a deep breath, and when she spoke again, her voice was softer but no less powerful. "Today I choose to learn what it means to build rather than destroy, to hope rather than to conquer, to feel not just to command." The room was silent, the only sound the soft crackling of the dying embers at her feet. The counselors exchanged glances, their minds racing to comprehend the magnitude of her words. The High General opened his mouth to protest again, but no sound came out. For the first time in his long life, he was at a loss for words. Xael'ara stepped forward, heard feet crunching on the broken shards of her throne. "The war will end," she said, her voice now a command, a declaration of a new era. "We will not burn their worlds. We will not enslave their people. Instead, we will reach out. We will learn. And we will rebuild. Not just our empire, but something greater. Something that does not feed on fear, but on understanding. On hope." As she spoke, she could feel the ancient barriers within her beginning to crumble, the cold armor of her heart replaced by the warmth of a newfound purpose. She had once been a queen of destruction, but now she saw a different path. One that was uncharted, uncertain, yet filled with the possibility of redemption. The counselors, still reeling from the destruction of the throne, could only stare at her, their minds grappling with the idea of a future so different from the one they had always known. If that story moved you, even just a little, don't forget to hit the like button. Subscribe for more powerful sci-fi tales that explore what it truly means to be human across galaxies. And remember, sometimes the smallest emotions spark the biggest changes. See you in the next story.